It started as an ordinary day when my old friend Henry came to visit me. I hadn't seen him in years. His life had turned around so drastically that I barely recognized him. Henry, once as poor as I was, now carried the aura of wealth. His clothes were finer, his manner more polished. It didn't take long before curiosity got the best of me. I asked him outright how he'd managed to turn his life around so suddenly. At first, Henry was evasive. He shrugged off my questions, claiming hard work and luck had been his key to success. But as the day wore on, and we shared more drinks, he leaned in closer and, in a whisper, revealed his secret. "There's an opportunity, a deal I made. But it comes with a price." His words hung in the air, thick with an ominous weight. I should have stopped him there, should have walked away. But greed was already gnawing at my soul, and I pressed him for more. Henry told me of a man he met, a mysterious figure with an offer that seemed too good to be true. This man promised riches beyond imagination, but in return, every year, a life close to the one blessed had to be sacrificed. He didn't elaborate much, and I should have run. But Henry's lavish life blinded me, and soon, I found myself meeting this man. The deal was simple, or so it seemed at the time. I signed the contract, and the wealth began pouring in almost immediately. My debts vanished, my house transformed, and my bank account swelled with numbers I could only dream of. For the first time in my life, I was rich. My family was thrilled, my friends envious, and I basked in the new reality. But lurking in the back of my mind was Henry's warning, the price. A year passed, and I tried to ignore the gnawing dread. I thought maybe it wouldn't happen to me. Maybe the mysterious man wouldn't come to collect. But when my childhood friend David suddenly fell ill and died in a car crash weeks later, I knew the truth. David's death was no accident. He was the sacrifice. I had barely thought of him all year, yet fate, or the man, whoever controlled this twisted arrangement, chose him. Guilt weighed heavy, but the wealth remained. I tried to convince myself that David's death was a coincidence, that it had nothing to do with the deal I made. But deep down, I knew better. My mind spiraled into paranoia, constantly waiting for the next person to be taken. Each day brought new fear, new anxiety. The riches I once reveled in now felt like a curse. Henry and I kept in touch, though not as often as before. The weight of our shared secret was too heavy for casual conversation. The next year rolled around, and I felt it again, the looming sense of dread, the whispered promise of another life to be taken. This time, it was Henry. He died in a mysterious house fire. No one could explain how it happened. The authorities ruled it as an accident, but I knew better. The sacrifice had claimed its next victim. My hand shook as I attended Henry's funeral. I stood among his grieving family, feeling the guilt crash over me in waves. I had ended his wealth, and now I was living the nightmare that came with it. 2 people gone. 2 friends sacrificed. I wondered who would be next. I couldn't shake the feeling that this cursed arrangement wasn't finished with me yet. I began to drink heavily, trying to drown the guilt and fear. My once happy family life began to unravel as my wife grew concerned about my erratic behavior. But how could I tell her the truth? How could I explain that the wealth we now enjoyed came at such a terrible cost? The days after Henry's death were a blur. I barely left my house, fearing that if I stepped outside, I would see the mysterious man watching me from the shadows. My wealth, once a source of pride, now felt like a noose tightening around my neck. Everywhere I went, I felt eyes on me, as if the deal's enforcer was always near, waiting to remind me of the blood I owed. My family noticed the change in me. My wife, Claire, tried to get me to open up, but how could I? I couldn't bear the thought of confessing that her newfound luxury was built on death. So, I withdrew further, isolating myself even from my children. The sacrifices loomed over every family gathering, every happy moment marred by the thought that one of them could be next. Every night, I relived the deaths of David and Henry in my nightmares. I saw their faces, their eyes accusing me of betrayal. I wondered if they knew in their final moments that I had been the cause of their fate. The burden was unbearable, and yet I couldn't escape it. The deal had been made. The price had to be paid. A year passed once again, and the deadline was near. I felt the familiar weight of impending doom growing heavier with each day. But this time, it was different. There were no more distant friends to lose. The circle of people I cared about had grown smaller, and that left only my family. I was consumed by terror. The thought of losing Claire or one of my children broke me. I couldn't let them suffer because of my greed. I knew what had to be done, but I didn't know how to stop it. There was no escape, no way to undo the deal. The man who had given me this cursed wealth was unreachable, and the terms of the contract were ironclad. Desperation took hold. I began to distance myself from my family, hoping that if I wasn't close to them, they would be spared. I thought if I loved them less, they wouldn't be at risk. But it was futile. The more I tried to push them away, the more they clung to me, concerned for my well-being. They had no idea the danger they were in. The day came when I knew the sacrifice would be demanded again. I couldn't sleep the night before, knowing that one of my loved ones was fated to die. My mind raced with the horrific possibility that I might have to choose. Would it be my wife, Claire, the woman who had stood by me through thick and thin? Or perhaps one of my children, whose innocent faces I couldn't bear to imagine lifeless? I didn't know how the choice would be made, or if I had any say in it. All I knew was that someone close to me was going to die. And I would be responsible. I wandered through the house in a daze, each step heavy with the knowledge of the impending loss. Every smile, every laugh from my family felt like a dagger to the heart, knowing that it could be their last. I had nowhere to turn. No one to talk to. I was trapped in my own nightmare, unable to stop the inevitable. The wealth I had once craved now felt like a curse that would destroy everything I loved. In the early hours of the morning, I awoke to a scream. Claire's voice echoed through the house, and I rushed to her side, heart pounding in my chest. She was standing in the doorway of our son's room, pale and shaking. Inside, I found our youngest, Michael, lying lifeless in his bed. His face was peaceful, as if he had simply fallen asleep and never woken up. I fell to my knees, screaming in agony. This was the sacrifice. The price had been paid. I had lost my son. The doctors couldn't explain it. They called it sudden infant death, a tragic but natural event. But I knew better. The man, the deal, the curse, it had claimed its victim. My hands were stained with the blood of my own child. I had traded my son's life for wealth, and now I had to live with that unbearable truth. After Michael's death, I spiraled into a deep depression. The house that was once filled with the laughter of children now echoed with silence. Claire was inconsolable, and my other children barely spoke to me. I had failed them all. The weight of my guilt was crushing, but there was no one to blame but myself. I had made the deal. I had accepted the terms. The wealth meant nothing to me anymore. I would have given it all back if I could, but it was too late. The mysterious man was nowhere to be found, and the deal was irreversible. I was trapped in a nightmare of my own making, and every day I woke up wishing it was all just a bad dream. I considered ending it all, thinking that maybe if I was gone, the sacrifices would stop. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. Claire and the children needed me, no matter how broken I was. And deep down, I feared that even death wouldn't free me from the curse. As the year dragged to its bitter conclusion, I felt the weight of the impending sacrifice suffocating me. I couldn't lose anyone else. Not Claire, not my remaining children. I spent sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, plagued by memories of Michael's death and haunted by the faces of those I had lost. The wealth, once a dream, had turned into a gilded prison, each luxury item a reminder of the lives I had traded away. Desperation drove me to the unthinkable. I sought out the mysterious man who had given me this cursed fortune. I searched everywhere, dark alleys, seedy bars, even the places Henry had hinted at in his drunken confessions. But he was nowhere to be found. The deal had been made, and there was no reversing it. No pleading for mercy. My only option left was to make a choice. As the final night arrived, the terror reached its peak. I stood in front of a mirror, staring at the hollow shell of the man I'd become. I thought of Claire, her loving smile dimmed by the grief that had consumed her after Michael's death. I thought of my remaining children, innocent and unaware of the looming doom that had claimed their brother. I couldn't let the cycle continue. I couldn't bear to lose another soul. In the early hours, I made my choice. I took the burden upon myself. If the deal required a sacrifice, I would offer my own life. I would die before allowing another person I loved to be taken by this monstrous pact. I sat alone in the quiet of my study, waiting for the man or whatever dark force was in control to come for me. I braced myself for the end, praying that my death would break the curse once and for all. But the man never came. Days passed. And then weeks. The dread that had been my constant companion began to lift. It seemed, for reasons I couldn't understand, that my act of offering myself had satisfied the terms of the deal. My family remained untouched. The curse had lifted, at the price of my sanity, my joy, and everything that once made me whole. The wealth stayed, but I found no pleasure in it. I was a broken man, surviving only because I refused to see another loved one die. Wealth and success that come at the expense of others carry a heavy price. When we prioritize greed and personal gain over the lives and well-being of those around us, we risk losing more than just material things. We lose our humanity, our relationships, and ultimately, our soul. The moral of my story is simple: no amount of wealth is worth the cost of a life. The pursuit of riches should never come at the expense of the people we care about. Sacrificing others to fulfill selfish desires only leads to loneliness, guilt, and a hollow existence. The true riches in life are the love and bonds we share with those close to us. It's easy to be blinded by material desires, but in the end, nothing can replace the people we hold dear. Be mindful of the deals you make, the shortcuts you take, and the price you're willing to pay.